The studio lights always felt too bright. Even after years of doing this, the heat, the hum, the quiet countdown before we're live, it still made her pulse quicken. She sat in front of the mirror, surrounded by the usual chaos, stylists rushing, producers whispering, makeup brushes tapping. The reflection that stared back at her looked perfect, smooth skin, flawless hair, calm eyes. But none of it felt real anymore. Her life had become a well-rehearsed segment. Smile. Ask. Listen. Pretend to care. Repeat. Tonight's interview was different though, not just another guest, not another rehearsed conversation. He was an actor, someone everyone wanted a piece of. And though she'd never met him, she'd already heard the stories, charming, unpredictable, dangerously alive. Her husband, the show's executive producer, peeked into the dressing room. "You ready?" he asked, voice clipped and businesslike. "Always," she replied with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. He nodded and left, already talking into his headset. As the door closed, the room exhaled. She stared at her reflection again. The perfect woman, the perfect host, the perfect wife. A makeup artist adjusted the light, and for a moment, her reflection fractured into tiny glimmers of gold. Somewhere in that broken light, she thought she saw the truth. A woman holding herself together just long enough for the red light on the camera to blink on. Then someone said, "He's here." She didn't turn right away. She heard his voice before she saw him, low, steady, unhurried. A voice that sounded like it belonged to someone who never rushed for anything. When she finally looked up, he was already watching her. No smile, no greeting, just that calm, curious gaze that made her feel, for the first time in a long time, like she was the one being interviewed. And as the floor manager counted down, 5, 4, 3, she realized her hands were trembling. The red light blinked on. "Good evening," she began, her voice perfectly steady, practiced, smooth as glass. The teleprompter scrolled, the cameras glided, and somewhere behind the bright studio lights, a million unseen eyes watched. But she only saw one. He sat opposite her, relaxed in his chair, one hand resting loosely on his knee. The actor everyone adored, charming, brilliant, impossible to ignore. His presence filled the room effortlessly, the kind of confidence that made silence feel like a choice, not an accident. "Welcome," she said with a smile. "It's good to finally have you here." "Good to be here," he replied, his voice low and easy. "I've watched you before." She hesitated, just a second, before continuing with the script. "Well, now you're the one in the chair." "Feels strange," he said, leaning forward. "Usually I'm the one pretending to be someone else." There was laughter from the control room. It was a harmless line. Except it didn't feel harmless. The interview flowed like any other, but something beneath the surface kept shifting. Every time their eyes met, the conversation slowed, not visibly, not enough for anyone to notice, but she could feel it. Like gravity had changed direction, pulling her toward him instead of the lens. He didn't flirt the way others did. He didn't need to. Every answer he gave carried a quiet dare. "Do you really want to know?" At one point, when she asked about his latest film, he smiled faintly and said, "It's about two people who meet by accident. But the real story starts when they stop pretending it's an accident." She froze for a heartbeat too long. In her earpiece, the producer's voice whispered, "Keep going. Smile." She did. But her hands tightened around the cue cards, knuckles white. He noticed. Of course he did. And with that same small, knowing smile, he asked softly, almost off script, "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" The words weren't for the audience. They were for her. And she didn't answer. The red light blinked off. The interview ended. But something else had just begun. The applause faded before she even heard it. The moment the red light on the camera blinked off, the spell broke, and reality rushed back in like cold air. The crew buzzed around her, praising the segment. "Perfect chemistry," someone said. You two were electric, said another. She smiled, said thank you, pretended not to understand what they meant. But inside, her pulse was still racing from something that had nothing to do with television. In the dressing room, she pulled out her earpiece and set it on the counter. Her reflection stared back at her, same hair, same calm expression, but the eyes were different. Brighter. Guilty. Alive. A knock at the door. Come in, she said, assuming it was her assistant. It wasn't. He leaned against the doorframe, casual, unreadable. The actor, still in the same dark shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened just enough to look accidental. He didn't speak right away, he just looked at her the way people do when they're trying to memorize something. Great interview, he said finally. Thank you, she answered, forcing professionalism back into her tone. You made it easy. He smiled, the kind that barely moved his mouth but changed everything else about his face. I wasn't trying to make it easy. She tried to laugh it off. You like making people uncomfortable? Only when they hide behind the camera, he said softly. Or behind questions. That silence again. Heavy, alive. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. You shouldn't be here, she said, though her voice didn't sound convincing. Probably not, he agreed. But I didn't like how it ended. It ended exactly how it was supposed to. Did it? She turned back to the mirror to avoid his eyes, but it didn't help, he was reflected behind her, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, see his outline blurred in the golden light. I think, he said quietly, you meant more of what you said on camera than you realize. Her throat went dry. You don't even know me. He smiled faintly. I know what you look like when you stop pretending. Before she could answer, someone from production called her name down the hall. She blinked, breaking whatever was about to happen. When she turned around again, he was already at the door. Until next time, Miss Davis. He left. The air he'd disturbed still hung thick around her. She sat down slowly, heart pounding, and whispered to her reflection. What did I just start? The apartment was quiet except for the faint sound of the dishwasher and the hum of the city outside. She sat at the kitchen table, still in her work clothes, makeup smudged at the corners of her eyes, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her. Her husband came in, loosening his tie. You were great tonight, he said, leaning over to kiss her on the head. She smiled automatically. Thank you. He poured himself a drink, his voice easy, casual, too casual. That guy you interviewed, he's intense. She pretended to scroll through her phone. He's an actor. They're all like that. Yeah, he said slowly. Still. The way he looked at you on camera, it was like he forgot there were people watching. She laughed softly, too quickly. You're imagining things. Am I? He asked, turning to face her. It felt different. Real. That word again. Real. She felt something tighten in her chest. It's my job to make it look real, she said. That's what people tune in for. He didn't reply. Just nodded, finished his drink, and went to the bedroom. When the door closed behind him, the silence came back, heavy and familiar. She opened her phone, scrolled to the show's official page. The interview clip was already trending. Comments flooded the screen. The chemistry is insane. You can't fake that connection. He was flirting, right? Tell me I'm not crazy. Her pulse quickened. She watched the playback, the moment he asked, do you ever get tired of pretending? The pause, her face, her silence. It looked different now. More dangerous. She turned off the phone, but the screen's reflection lingered in the window, her own face, illuminated by the glow of something she didn't want to name. From the bedroom came her husband's soft snore. She sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at her reflection in the glass, and whispered. I wasn't pretending. It was just after midnight when her phone buzzed. She was lying in bed beside her husband, pretending to sleep, the glow from the screen painting soft light across the sheets. Unknown number, but she didn't need to guess. Her chest tightened as she opened the message. You were the only one who understood me tonight. She stared at the words, her heartbeat loud in her ears. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic, just a simple sentence that broke through everything she had tried to rebuild since the interview ended. She read it again. And again. Her husband shifted beside her, murmuring something half asleep. She turned the screen face down, pulse racing. She should have ignored it. She should have deleted it, blocked the number, rolled over, gone back to sleep. But she didn't. Instead, she got up quietly, padded barefoot into the kitchen, and sat down at the table in the dark. The city outside blinked faintly, streetlights, passing cars, the sound of a siren far away. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, erased, typed again. It's just part of the job, you know. Delete. You're reading too much into it. Delete. Finally, she wrote what she really wanted to say, the thing she couldn't admit even to herself. I understood you because I stopped pretending, too. She didn't send it. But she didn't delete it either. The message sat there, glowing softly on the screen, like a confession waiting to be spoken. Her phone buzzed again, another text. You looked like yourself tonight. Don't lose that. She exhaled shakily, pressing the screen to her chest, as if the pressure could calm the chaos inside her. But nothing did. Because in a single evening, on camera, under blinding lights, she'd felt more seen than she had in years of marriage. And that realization was the most dangerous truth of all. The network's anniversary gala was supposed to be routine, a celebration, a string of polite smiles, champagne flutes, and rehearsed laughter echoing through the marble hall. She'd done 100 of these before. Tonight should have felt no different. But the moment she saw his name on the guest list, something inside her shifted. He was there for another interview segment, a reunion piece, nothing more. That's what she told herself as she walked through the crowd, her black dress moving like smoke around her legs, her husband busy shaking hands with executives. She kept smiling, answering small talk with automatic charm, pretending the room wasn't spinning around a single thought, he's here. And then, through the haze of people and light, she saw him. He was leaning against the bar, drink in hand, the same calm energy she remembered. When their eyes met across the room, the noise fell away. Just like last time. Just like it always did. He didn't smile this time. He just looked at her, steady, unblinking, and in that gaze, she felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing against her ribs. When the speeches began, she took a seat near the stage, pretending to check her notes. She could feel him watching her from the other side of the room. Every time she glanced up, his eyes found hers again. After the event, she tried to leave quietly, but he was waiting near the exit, casual, but intentional. You're hard to forget, he said softly. She froze. You shouldn't say that. I didn't plan to, he said, stepping closer. But some things just refused to stay quiet. People passed them, laughing, saying goodbye, unaware that something irreversible was happening in the space between them. You're married, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes. And still, you came tonight knowing I'd be here. She swallowed hard. You were just another guest. He smiled faintly. And yet you've been avoiding every guest but me. Her throat tightened. Stop. Tell me to go, he whispered. Really tell me. But she didn't. He leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear. You don't have to pretend when you talk to me. It was a sentence, not a touch. But it felt like both. Before she could reply, a voice called her name, her husband, walking toward them, smiling for the cameras. She stepped back instantly, her pulse thundering in her ears. Good night, she said quickly, her voice steady but breaking beneath the surface. He nodded. Not yet. Then he walked away, leaving her with the echo of that voice, that look, and the terrible, thrilling realization that she didn't want him to stop. The next morning arrived too early. The light filtering through the curtains felt too sharp, too clean, like it was trying to expose something she wasn't ready to face. Her husband was still asleep beside her, one arm draped over the pillow where she should have been. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same scene, the way he'd looked at her last night, the quiet certainty in his voice when he said, "You don't have to pretend when you talk to me." It was nothing. That's what she told herself. Just words. Just tension. Just a moment. But it wasn't. It was everything. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She hesitated, pulse quickening before she even touched it. Unknown number, again. But she already knew. "Did you sleep?" That was all it said. Simple. Innocent on the surface. But the subtext hit her like a breath she couldn't release. She stared at it for a long time, her thumb hovering above the keyboard. The rational part of her screamed, "Delete it, ignore it, forget it." But the truth was, she'd been waiting for it. She typed back slowly, her heart thudding in her chest. "Barely." "You?" The reply came almost instantly. "Same. I kept thinking about the way you looked at me before your husband came over." Her stomach flipped. She started to type, "You can't say things like that." But she didn't send it. Because she didn't mean it. Instead, she wrote, "That wasn't supposed to happen." A pause. Then 3 dots appeared, the kind that make your breath stop. "Then why didn't you stop it?" She locked the phone, tossing it face down on the bed. Her pulse was racing now. From the kitchen came the sound of her husband making coffee, humming to himself, unaware, peaceful, ordinary. She sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers gripping the sheets, her heart torn between guilt and something darker, something alive. She told herself it would end here. It had to. But when her phone buzzed again, she couldn't help it, she looked. "You asked the questions on camera. Let me ask one now. When was the last time someone made you feel like you?" Her hands trembled. The sunlight hit the screen, and for a second, she saw her reflection, tired, conflicted, but unmistakably awake. That's when she knew. It wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. She told herself it wasn't a meeting. Just a conversation. Just closure. But deep down, she already knew it was a lie. He was staying at one of those quiet boutique hotels, the kind that didn't ask questions. The kind of place where people went to disappear for a few hours. When she walked into the lobby, the soft hum of jazz music filled the air. Dim lights. Expensive silence. She spotted him instantly, sitting at the corner of the bar, a glass of whiskey half finished in front of him. He didn't look surprised to see her, just calm, like he'd known she'd come all along. "Did anyone see you?" he asked, his voice low. She managed a nervous smile. "You make it sound like a crime." "Maybe it is," he said softly, eyes not leaving hers. "But you came anyway." She sat beside him, the air between them thick and fragile. The bartender poured her a drink, but she didn't touch it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "You know what I've realized about you?" She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What?" "You spend your life asking people questions. But no one ever asks how you feel." She froze. That was the line, the one that broke through everything she'd been holding together. He wasn't wrong. No one ever asked. And she had stopped expecting them to. Her throat tightened. "It's not my job to feel," she said. He smiled faintly. "Then whose job is it?" She looked down at her hands, her wedding ring glinting in the golden light. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know." "Then why aren't we leaving?" That made him laugh, quiet, soft, dangerous. "Because this is the only place where we're not pretending." She exhaled shakily, the air between them trembling with everything unsaid. For the first time in years, she wasn't performing. There were no cameras, no scripts, no masks. Just two people sitting in a dim bar, trying to remember what honesty felt like. He reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against hers on the counter, not a grab, not a demand, just a silent question. Her hand didn't move away. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, a storm coming somewhere far off. Inside, the air was still. Too still. She finally whispered, "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said. "But it's real." And in that moment, that small, quiet, terrifying second, she realized she was already too far gone. The drive home felt endless. The city lights stretched out like 1,000 tiny lies she was trying to outrun. Her hand stayed tight on the steering wheel, but her mind wasn't on the road. It was still in that dim hotel bar, replaying every word, every look, every breath. By the time she pulled into the driveway, the rain had started. The sound against the windshield was soft, rhythmic, too gentle for what she felt inside. Her husband was in the living room when she came in, sitting on the couch, laptop open, phone buzzing beside him. "You're late," he said without looking up. "There was traffic," she murmured, slipping off her heels. He typed something, still focused on the screen. "I saw they're replaying your interview tonight." "The one with him." Her chest tightened. "Already?" "Yeah. Ratings were good. People loved it." He smiled faintly, finally glancing up at her. "You were great, by the way." She forced a small smile. "Thanks." He turned back to his work. "Want to watch it again?" "No," she said too quickly. But after he went to bed, she sat alone in the dark living room, the television still humming softly. The replay started on its own, one of those automated broadcasts. And there she was again, on screen, calm, composed, beautiful. Sitting across from him. The camera caught everything she thought she'd hidden, the flicker in her eyes, the way her smile trembled when he spoke, the breath she held when he said, "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" It was unbearable to watch. But she couldn't look away. The sound of her own laughter through the speakers felt foreign, rehearsed, hollow. And when she saw the exact moment he looked at her like he could see straight through the mask, something inside her broke all over again. She muted the TV. The silence that followed was worse. Her reflection stared back at her from the black screen, tired, guilty, alive. Her phone buzzed beside her. Another message. "You looked beautiful tonight. Even the reruns can't fake that." She hesitated for a long time before typing back. "I can't keep doing this." A few seconds later, the reply came. "Then stop pretending you don't want to." Her heart dropped. She locked the phone, pressed it to her chest, and whispered to no one. "This isn't real." But deep down, she knew, it was the only thing that ever had been. He called it a thank you dinner. Nothing more. Nothing less. That's what she kept repeating to herself as she got ready, standing in front of the mirror, watching her reflection turn into someone she barely recognized. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened the earring, the gold glinting in the soft light. She told herself it was nerves. But deep down, she knew it was something else. Her husband thought she was attending a late production meeting. He kissed her on the cheek, distracted by his phone. "Don't stay too long," he murmured. "I won't," she lied. The restaurant was quiet, tucked away on a side street with no sign outside. When she walked in, he was already there, no cameras, no lights, no masks. Just him. He stood when he saw her, smiling softly. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't." "But you did." They talked like old friends at first, about movies, work, the weather. Normal things. Safe things. But every word carried that silent pull, that unspoken question neither dared to voice. At one point, he said, "You know, it's strange. I've met hundreds of people who ask me questions. But you were the only one who ever listened." She looked down, trying to hide the truth in her eyes. "You shouldn't say things like that." Why not? Because I might believe them. That made him smile, slow, genuine, dangerous. The air between them changed. Dinner ended, but neither stood up to leave. The world outside felt far away, almost imaginary. When they finally walked out, the city was half asleep. They strolled without a destination, the sound of their footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. He stopped near the corner of the street, beneath a flickering light. "You keep pretending this doesn't mean something," he said quietly. "And you keep pretending you're not the reason I can't breathe right now," she whispered. He took a step closer. Close enough that she could smell the faint scent of his cologne, the warmth of his breath. "Tell me to stop," he said. She didn't. His hand brushed against her cheek, his thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. The world narrowed to that single moment, no cameras, no words, no lies. Then he kissed her. It wasn't hurried or desperate. It was slow. Careful. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for permission because it already knew the answer. When they finally pulled away, her heart was still beating in his rhythm. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. Later that night, in the quiet of her car, her phone buzzed. "It was the best night of my life. Thank you." She stared at the message until the words blurred through her tears. Then she locked the screen, placed the phone face down, and whispered into the empty silence. "Mine too." Morning came like punishment, too bright, too real. She woke to the sound of her husband in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, the news murmuring from the TV. Everything looked the same. But nothing was. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head pounding, her heart still caught somewhere between guilt and memory. The taste of last night still lingered, his words, his breath, that impossible quiet after the kiss. When she reached for her phone, there were no new messages. No good morning, no last night meant something, no what now. Just silence. She waited. She told herself he was busy, that he'd text later. But as hours turned into the whole morning, and the morning into afternoon, the silence started to ache. At the studio, everything felt off. The lights were too sharp, the air too cold. Her coworkers laughed about weekend plans, oblivious to the storm inside her. She checked her phone again. Nothing. Finally, she asked one of the production assistants, trying to sound casual, "Hey, do you know if he's doing any more interviews this week?" The girl shrugged. "I heard he left town. Flew out early this morning." That was it. No goodbye. No message. Just gone. The words echoed in her mind all day. "It was the best night of my life. Thank you." She'd read them 100 times, and now they felt like a cruel goodbye disguised as gratitude. That evening, when she got home, her husband was sitting on the couch watching TV. The screen flickered with her own face, the interview replaying again, her voice calm, her smile flawless. He looked up at her. "You two looked comfortable together," he said casually. She forced a small laugh. "That's the job." "Right," he said, but his eyes lingered longer than usual. When she kissed his cheek, he didn't move. She went to the bedroom, closed the door, and finally let herself breathe. She replayed everything in her head, his voice in the dark, the warmth of his hand, the silence afterward. Maybe it was always supposed to end like this, in half-truths and what-ifs, in a moment that couldn't survive daylight. Her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. But it was just a calendar reminder, interview at 8 p.m. She almost laughed, the kind of laugh that comes when you're too close to crying. That night, she stood in front of the camera again. Same lights. Same lines. Same perfect performance. But when the countdown started, 5, 4, 3, she looked straight into the lens and saw him. Not literally, but in the way she held her breath, in the truth that still burned in her chest. For the first time in her career, she forgot her first line. Weeks turned into months. The story that had begun in a studio and ended in silence slowly dissolved into memory. But not completely. Life went on, the way it always does. New interviews, new guests, new headlines. Her husband started smiling again, the way people do when they believe everything is back to normal. And she learned to play her part better than ever. Professional. Polished. Untouchable. Except some nights, when the city was quiet and the lights from passing cars moved across the ceiling, she'd still feel it, that flicker. That pulse of something real that had burned for one night and then vanished like smoke. She told herself it was for the best. He'd moved on. So had she. That's what adults do, they fold their emotions neatly and tuck them away somewhere safe, where no one can see the damage. Until one evening. She was driving home after a late segment, the kind where the air feels heavy with exhaustion. The radio played softly in the background, a familiar voice introducing a guest. She almost didn't notice at first. Then the voice spoke. His voice. She froze, her hand tightening on the steering wheel. It had been months, but she recognized it instantly, the calm tone, the quiet confidence. He was promoting a new film. It's about truth, he said. About how we spend our lives pretending to be who people want us to be. But sometimes, even for one night, someone comes along and reminds you who you really are. Her breath caught. The interviewer laughed lightly. Sounds personal. He paused. Maybe it is. Silence filled the car, a fragile, golden kind of silence that didn't need words. She could almost see him again, that calm look, the faint smile that always seemed to know too much. As the segment ended, the host asked, "And what did you learn from it?" He hesitated for a long moment. Then he said, "That the best stories don't belong to the audience. They belong to the people who lived them, even if no one ever knows." She turned off the radio. The car filled with the sound of her heartbeat. When she got home, her husband was asleep. She slipped into bed beside him, the world perfectly quiet. On her nightstand, her phone buzzed once, a new message. She stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. "You looked like yourself again tonight." No name. No number. Just words. Her breath trembled. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned off the light, lay there in the dark, and smiled, not the rehearsed smile from TV, but the one that only ever existed off the record. Because maybe some stories weren't meant to end. Maybe the best ones never really do.